Picture the scene. It is November 28th, 2022. It's just an ordinary Monday evening in Turin, Italy, but at the headquarters of one of football's most historic, most powerful clubs, absolutely everything is falling apart. We're talking total chaos. In a single evening, the entire board of directors of Juventus resigns on the spot. This includes the chairman, Andrea Agnelli, a man whose family had literally controlled the club for nearly a century. And this wasn't because of a bad run of games on the pitch. No, Italy's financial police had cars parked right outside, and a massive criminal probe codenamed Prisma was closing in fast. The core allegations here were staggering. Investigators claim the club was running a systematic inflation of transfer fees and totally hidden salary cuts, all completely designed to artificially meet strict financial regulations. Accountants are calling this the Enron of football, and today we explain exactly why.
As the dust settled from that raid, that exact phrase, the Enron of football, began echoing through the sporting world. I mean, you really have to ask yourself, how does a club that won 9 straight Italian league titles end up at the center of a financial investigation that shakes the very foundation of European sports? Well, the mechanics of how they pulled this off are fascinating, and at the 6-minute mark, we'll show you the exact accounting technique they used and why UEFA's auditors didn't catch it for years. Because honestly, once you see the clever math behind it, you are never going to look at a multi-million-dollar football transfer the same way again.
To understand the how of this whole scandal, we first have to look at the why. What drove them to do this? Well, on one hand, you have the crushing, immediate reality of the COVID-19 pandemic. Empty stadiums, zero ticket revenue coming in. Internal emails from the club reportedly projected these staggering losses of around €177 million for the 2020 season alone. That is a massive hole to fill. But on the other hand, there was this immense, unyielding pressure weighing on the executives. You have to remember, Juventus isn't just a football team. It's a publicly listed company on the Milan Stock Exchange. That means they have shareholders and incredibly strict financial regulators scrutinizing every single penny. Add to that UEFA's financial fair play rules, which essentially mandate that clubs simply cannot spend drastically more than they earn. And under Italian rules, if a club falls into negative net equity, they might not even be allowed to register to play in the league at all. So the bottom line? Juventus was in an absolute pressure cooker. They had a massive, existential incentive to make their balance sheet look infinitely healthier than it actually was.
And this brings us to the foundational accounting concept you absolutely need to know to understand this trick. Don't worry, we're going to make this very simple. It's a concept called amortization. In the somewhat bizarre world of football accounting, there is a massive asymmetry in how money is recorded. When a club sells a player, that transfer fee counts as profit on their books instantly. Boom, right away. But when a club buys a player, the cost of that purchase isn't recorded all at once. Instead, the accountants spread that cost out evenly over the length of the player's contract, which is usually 4 to 5 years. So think about it. Selling gives your balance sheet a massive, immediate injection of green, while buying only results in this tiny, delayed trickle of red. This asymmetry is the very foundation of the scandal. And as you'll see, it leads directly to a maneuver that essentially creates money right out of thin air.
Okay, so let's walk through this step by step. Here's the infamous plusvalenze, or capital gains scheme, clearly laid out. Let's say Club A and Club B each have a player. They agree to just swap these players. But instead of swapping them for free, which makes sense, they agree to value both players at incredibly inflated prices, let's say €20 million each. Now, because the values cancel each other out, almost no actual physical cash changes hands between the two clubs. Nobody is writing a €20 million check here. But remember that amortization rule we just talked about? Because they each theoretically sold a player for €20 million, both clubs get to instantly record a massive €20 million paper profit on their books for that year. What about the cost of the player they just bought? Well, that gets quietly spread out over the next 5 years. They have literally magically created profit out of thin air just to pass their financial audits. It's a brilliant, if highly controversial, loophole.
And the sheer scale of what we're talking about here is almost hard to comprehend. 282 million. That is the amount, in euros, of capital gains flogged by Italy's football watchdog over just a 3-year period. Investigators looked at 62 highly suspicious transfers across the entire league, and an astonishing 42 of them involved Juventus. Prosecutors alleged that this entire 282 million was effectively a mirage generated purely to balance the books artificially. Now, to be fair, it is absolutely crucial to state here that Juventus consistently denied any wrongdoing. Their defense was basically, hey, player valuation is highly subjective. Who's to say a reserve player isn't actually worth €20 million to the right scout? They claim they simply followed standard industry accounting practices, but the financial police, yeah, they saw it very, very differently.
Now, you might think this clever transfer trick was the defining piece of the puzzle, but it was actually the salary cut documents, the so-called side letters, that proved criminal intent. Consider this a major pivot in our story, because this is where things get really deceptive. Back in March 2020, right at the height of the pandemic fear, Juventus made this highly publicized, seemingly noble announcement. Their players had heroically agreed to give up 4 months of their wages to help the club survive the crisis. The estimated savings for the club? A cool 90 million euros. The press globally praised the players, the executives patted themselves on the back. It looked like a brilliant unified sacrifice. And on the public balance sheet, it showed up as a massive chunk of saved cash, pulling them right away from the brink of that terrifying negative net equity.
But investigators soon discovered that this heartwarming public announcement was really only half the story. Enter the side letter. When prosecutors raided the club's offices, they alleged they found strictly confidential, private agreements hidden away from public view. According to the investigators, while the players publicly gave up 4 months of wages, these side letters secretly promised to pay back 3 of those 4 months under the table at a later date. What this means is that the 90 million euro savings on the official books was a total illusion. The club still owed the vast majority of that money, they just completely hid the liability from the public, from their shareholders, and importantly, from the regulators.
The specific evidence they uncovered to prove this was staggering. One of these side letters reportedly involved the club's absolute biggest star at the time, Cristiano Ronaldo. This hidden document allegedly guaranteed him around 19.5 million euros that was kept completely off the official books. And we know for a fact these weren't just hypothetical promises, because years later, a sports arbitration panel actually ordered Juventus to pay him roughly 9.7 million euros in back wages. What really damned the executives, though, were the internal communications. Investigators found internal club notes and emails explicitly urging staff to keep this entire salary maneuver confidential. Look, when you are deliberately hiding accounting treatments from the outside world and explicitly telling your team to keep it quiet, prosecutors are going to strongly argue that proves you knew exactly what you were doing was wrong.
So, bringing it back to that big quote from the beginning, the similarities in the accounting logic between this and infamous corporate scandals are undeniable. We are talking about the exact same revenue recognition fraud just applied to a different industry. Both involved recognizing fake revenue and savings that didn't truly exist in cash. Both heavily utilized off-book, secret agreements to hide massive liabilities from the auditors. However, the differences in the real-world fallout are just as important to highlight. Enron resulted in a catastrophic corporate death, wiping out billions of dollars and sending top executives to federal prison for years. Juventus, on the other hand, is a historic sporting institution. The club survived, it did not go bankrupt, and, as we're about to see, the legal consequences took a very, very different path.
Let's map out exactly how those consequences cascaded down on them. The sporting authorities naturally hit first. In May 2023, Italy's football court officially slapped Juventus with a 10-point deduction in Serie A. This was devastating on the pitch. It instantly knocked them out of the highly lucrative Champions League qualification spots. Following right behind that, UEFA stepped in, handing them a complete ban from European competition for the entire 2023-2024 season, along with a hefty €20 million fine. But the real sword of Damocles hanging over the club was always that Prisma criminal case. After years of legal wrangling and jurisdiction changes, the criminal proceedings finally reached their conclusion in September 2025.
And when that criminal case finally did conclude, it ended in plea bargains. The top executives, Andrea Agnelli, Fabio Paratici, and Pavel Nedved, all received sentences ranging from 1 year and 2 months to 1 year and 8 months. But the absolutely critical detail you need to understand here is this. Every single one of these was a suspended sentence. Nobody went to prison, not for a single day. The club itself paid what is essentially a rounding error for them, a relatively tiny fine of 156,000 euros. And through it all, Juventus framed these plea deals merely as a practical way to end years of exhausting legal limbo. They maintained to the very end that there was no formal admission of guilt regarding their actual accounting practices. They simply took the hit to their reputation to finally close the book on the Prisma case once and for all.
Which leaves us with this final, highly provocative thought. If a club as heavily scrutinized, publicly listed, and historically successful as Juventus allegedly utilized these accounting tricks just to survive, if Juventus did this, which other clubs might be doing the exact same thing right now? Because remember, those amortization rules and the massive temptation of those plus Valenza player swaps, they exist across all of world football. Juventus just happened to get caught in the absolute brightest spotlight. It really makes you wonder how solid the financial foundations of the beautiful game truly are. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Up next, stick around. Next video, the Super League, the $6 billion power grab that collapsed in 48 hours. You definitely won't want to miss it.